the leader of the opposition, members of parliament, business, friends, professionals, friends, thank you for being present with us today. I'm going to take you a little bit very quickly from theory to practice, what we should be actually doing. So one of the things that we should be doing immediately is making the central bank independent. We know what happened with printing of money. We know what happened with inflation. We know the consequences of it. We need a central bank monetary policy which is independent of fiscal policy. Already the law was drawn in 2019. Dr. Samaratunga, Dr. Indrajit Kumaraswamy, Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe, Mangala Samaravira, myself, other officials were all involved in this. I'm calling upon the present government to bring this even before we come into office. Otherwise, this is one of the first things we will do. Anti-corruption measures, අල්ලස දූෂණය පිළිබඳව විශේෂයෙන්ම යොමුවක් තියෙන්න ඕනේ. මේ රට අපි හදන්න යනවා නම් අපි අල්ලසට දූෂණයට තිත තියන්න ඕනේ. කරුණු හතරක් මම මෙතන සඳහන් කරනවා. එකක් ඇවිල්ලා අපි වගේ දේශපාලඥයන්, ඉහළ මට්ටමේ නිලධාරීන් අපි අපේ වත්කම් බැරකම් ප්‍රසිද්ධ කළ යුතුමයි. මම ඉල්ලනවා නීතියනකන් ඉන්න ඕනේ නැහැ. මම පුද්ගලික මන්ත්‍රී කෙනෙක් හැටියට දැනටමත් මේ වගේ කෙටුම්පතක් පාර්ලිමේන්තුවට ඉදිරිපත් කරලා තියෙන්නේ. මම රජයට කියනවා කෙටුම්පත ගේන්න කියලා. කෙටුම්පත එනකන්වත් ඉන්න ඕනේ නැහැ. රනිල් වික්‍රමසිංහ ජනාධිපතිතුමාගෙන් මම ඉල්ලනවා නීතියක් තියෙන්න ඕනේ නැහැ. එතුමාගේ ඒ වත්කම් බැරකම් ප්‍රසිද්ධ කරන්න කියලා. පාර්ලිමේන්තුව අද තව හිටපු ජනාධිපතිවරු දෙන්නෙක් ඉන්නවා. මහින්ද රාජපක්ෂ ඉන්නවා, මෛත්‍රීපාල සිරිසේන ඉන්නවා. නීතියක් එන්න ඕනේ නැහැ. මම ඔවුන්ගෙන් ඉල්ලනවා ඔවුන්ගේ වත්කම් ප්‍රසිද්ධ කරන්න කියලා. ඒක බොහොම වැදගත් වෙනවා. Countries don't change only by law making. Countries change by example, an example of leaders. And therefore I've called upon the present president, two former presidents who are sitting in parliament to go public with the asset declarations, which will compel members of parliament like myself and high officials in this country to be accountable to the public. දෙවනුව මේකේ කරන්නේ තියෙන දේ ඇවිල්ලා අපි තියෙන අල්ලස් දූෂණ කොමිෂන් සභාවක්. ඒක අපි ස්වාධීන කරන්න ඕනේ. දැන් ඒක ස්වාධීන නැහැ. හොරකමක් හොයාගෙන යනවා. ආණ්ඩුවෙන් එවනවා විමර්ශනය කරන පොලිස් නිලධාරීන්. ආණ්ඩුව වෙනස් වෙනවා. ඒ නිලධාරීන් වයින් කරනවා. ඒක සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම කඩාකප්පල් කරනවා. ඔය සිස්ටම් එක තමයි මේ රටේ තියෙන්නේ. ඉතින් ඒක අපි ස්වාධීන කරන්න නීතිය වෙනස් කරන්න ඕනේ. ඒක දෙවෙනි එක. තුන්වෙනි එක ඇවිල්ලා ස්ටාර් ප්‍රෝග්‍රෑම් කියලා කියනවා, stolen assets recovery. මේක එක්සත් ජාතීන්ගේ සංවිධානයේ වැඩපිළිවෙලක්. මේ වැඩපිළිවෙල ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්න අපි නීතියක් ගේනවා. මේ වැඩපිළිවෙල ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්න. ඒ නීතිය ගෙනාපුවාම ඒව පිටිපස්සේ යන්න පුළුවන්. කියනවා ලංකාවේ හංගලා තිබුණත් පිට රටවල හංගලා තිබුණත් ඒ වත්කම් අපි නැවත ලබාගත යුතුයි. මේක රටේ ඉල්ලීම. ඒක තුන්වෙනි කරුණ. හතරවෙනි කරුණ අපි මෙතන අල්ලස් දූෂණයට විරුද්ධව ක්‍රියා කරන්නේ. මම හිටපු රාජ්‍ය මුදල් ඇමති. අද රාජ්‍ය මුදල් ඇමති. හෙට මම හොරකම් කරනවා. අද නීතිපති දෙපාර්තමේන්තුව මගේ උපදේශක. හෙට නීතිපති දෙපාර්තමේන්තුව මට විරුද්ධව නඩු දාන්න ඕනේ. අපි මං හිතන්නේ මේකෙන් ගැලවෙන්න ඕනේ. මෙතන there's a conflict of interest. යබැදියා ගැටුමක්. අපි ඒ නිසා අපි ඉල්ලනවා ස්වාධීන නඩු පැවරීමේ කාර්යාලයක් මේ රටේ තියෙන්න ඕනේ කියන එක. අල්ලස දූෂණයට අපි තිත තිබ්බොත් හුඟක් අනිත් ඒවා ඉබේටම හැදෙනවා. මම ඔබට කියන්න ඕනේ ඔබ ව්‍යාපාරිකයන් හැටියට යට ඉඳලා උඩටම අල්ලස් ගෙවන්න වෙලා තියෙන්නේ. මේක අපි වෙනස් කළ යුතුයි. අපේ රට අපි ඉදිරියට ගන්න යනවා නම්. So that was some measures on anti-corruption. Then another thing that we intend to do is to create a unified revenue collection authority. Now this is very important that we do this. You are businessmen. You pay taxes. Sri Lanka's revenue, huge amount, 75% or more, comes from three institutions. Inland Revenue Department, Customs Department, and Excise Department. I hope none of you accuse Mangala Samaravira or me of stealing a rupee or a dollar. But even while we were in office, the level of corruption in those departments did not go down. Therefore, we can't rely on individuals. We have to do systemic changes. And that is why we are going to put in place a unified revenue collection authority. You're a businessman, you import your goods, you go to the bank, you open your letter of credit, and then you had to get it cleared. You go to customs, I don't need to tell you the rest of the story. Customs only becomes the clearing house. Excise, similarly. Inland revenue, similarly. We can use technology. These are not new ideas. Other countries have done these things. Payment, assessment is done in one place. Payment is made centrally. Your interaction with these officials becomes minimal. And when the payment is made, the instruction goes out to the particular area, even to the customs. The goods can be cleared because payment has been made. I won't say more than that, but we want to create a unified revenue collection authority. Then, another huge barrier that you face often when you are in business is you want to basically get some land, in building a factory or an office or something like that. It's a huge problem. I can tell you, since I came from that side to this side, I tried to create a multimodal transport hub. And to create the multimodal transport hub, I had to get the UDA, I had to get the CGR, I had to get the CTB, I had to get the municipal council, all these authorities together just to get the land sorted out. It takes nearly 2 years to get the land sorted out. I was glad to see in the President's statement the other day, he said a National Land Council and a National Land Policy will be adopted. All I ask him is, please do it quickly. But we will take it beyond that, and we will create a National Land Bank. Because this is one of the huge obstacles that businesses in our country face. And that is why we want to make sure we move in this direction. The other issue that you are currently facing is that the fuel and energy issue. No easy solution. Immediately there is a dollar shortage and the payments can't be made. A few months ago, 2-3 months ago, MP Harshana Rajakaruna and I were at COP27. The President was there. It was a summit of leaders of countries on energy and on the environment. Harshana and I were there as members of parliament. And we were there in conferences with other members of parliament of South Asian countries. And one of the things that we don't often talk about is that Sri Lanka has a huge potential on sustainable energy. Huge, huge potential on sustainable energy. Our policy is going to be to open up the system. Sri Lanka's biggest hurdle is that we have been closed in our borders, and Harsha dealt with this a lot and saying we need to open it. But the bigger issue is we are closed in our mind, and we have to begin to open our mind and think out of the box. And therefore, this potential can't be tapped unless we have foreign investment. And I heard other political parties saying that foreign investment will not be welcomed in the energy sector. What kind of crap is that? We are never going to be able to do that with our savings because our debt problem. Therefore, we have to open it up for foreign investment. I can understand their logic. What are we talking here about? We are talking here about solar energy and wind energy. Rate sampat vikuranawa. Mukadda me katawa. Right? Therefore, we have to open up, and we have to. There's so much potential. In fact, Harshan and I started the discussions because with India, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Bhutan have bilateral arrangements. It's become an export. Sri Lanka's need can be met. More than that, we could even become an exporter of energy, and therefore we need to move in that direction. Then we need, another big issue that you have often is the legal process. You have all kinds of disputes, agreements, you want them enforced, all kinds of issues. Now I must confess up front, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a legal person, right? But there's a lot of this has been written. I saw Nema Gunawardana, Ranmali Fernando had recently written, then University of Colombo, I saw Kushani Patirana's article. Lots of things have been written here. So that there is fair and equal treatment. This is absolutely important. And also, business need guarantees against appropriation. When I was in the first parliament in 2010-2015, it was awful to see what the then government did that day. Private sector lost confidence that governments might use parliament to basically expropriate, transactions and assets that have already been given. This nonsense must stop. And therefore, we have constitutional guarantees. Despite the constitutional guarantees, that unlawful expropriation, predominant concern of the private sector, the state has a right to regulate, but not even to unlawfully and indirectly expropriate. Fair treatment must be ensured, and we will work on it. We need to be seen as a reliable country, that actually people, local business versus foreign business, can actually deal with us. So this needs a lot more consultation and try to figure out how we are going to do this. I don't have all the answers. We've identified this. We need to do this. We need to make Sri Lanka a center for arbitration seat in the region, and we have to move in this direction. Then we need to have centralized approvals. I'm talking not of the BOI. How about a local BOI? Why only the concept for foreign investment? How about local investment? Why haven't we thought about this? I remember several years ago, I saw Professor Rohan Samrajiva here a little while ago. And I remember several years ago, when the government, I was a banker then, asked me, how do you use ICT for development? And I said, I'm not an ICT specialist. They said, but you're a development specialist. How do you use this? And I went around, I found there was a government institution. They told me to be chairman of it. I went and took a look. There were more drivers and clerks than there were ICT people in the institution. I came up with a recommendation. I said, shut it down. And that's how ICTA was started. In some of these reorganizations, we'll have to be radical. I won't say much here, because we don't want to lose votes. After all, we are politicians. But I'm just telling you what we did. It's giving you an indication. We'll reform it, or we'll start it anew. Therefore, we need, right, a local BOI true for centralized approvals. So whether it's company registrations, if people apply within a specific period of time, the registrations are given. If they are not given, the company is automatically allowed to proceed. We have to be radical in our thinking if we want to really get this country going. These are not new concepts. Other countries have done these things, and therefore these things can be done. Whether it's utilities, local government, all the issues. Then foreign direct investment. I must say something about our foreign policy. Our foreign policy is an independent state. I like the old language that was used by Madam Sirimavu Bandaranayake, a non-aligned country. That's the old language. We are an independent state, of course, taking into consideration the security concerns of our closest neighbor, India, for obvious reasons, because of the proximity that we have, that we will take. We have to work intelligently, but we are an independent state. So that's our foreign policy. In this foreign policy, we don't care where investment comes from. Investment, we don't care where it comes from. All investment is. It will be by rules, played by rules. The rule of law will be paramount in inviting that investment. So we need to get that investment. I talked about the local BOI earlier, but I'm talking about the BOI here, and I'll use diplomatic language here. We'll have to have an empowered BOI. No question about it. And exports will be given primacy in what we do. Traditional exports, adding value. In addition to that, high-end services and basically high-tech manufacturing. So these institutions will be definitely re-looked at. Then state-owned enterprises. Harsha gave the staggering statistics of state-owned enterprises. This is just absolutely ridiculous. I remember the former Prime Minister, President called me one day and he said, I called you here because I have to give you another appointment. I said, what's it, sir? What's it about? He said, I want to put Sri Lankan Airlines under you. I turned to him and said, sir, podakinna. Mate eke epa. He looked very puzzled. So he asked me why. So I said, sir, mata harawanda bari dewal deela wadak naha. Everybody looked shocked. I think we have to stop fooling ourselves and telling each other things that others want to hear. Or you tell us things that we want to hear. Unless we are honest in this dialogue, we are not going to get anywhere. I don't need to speak a lot about the airline. If there's anybody here, you can pay $1, you can buy that airline, please go and talk to the present government. Right, so state-owned enterprises, okay, state-owned enterprises need to be reformed. I'm going to tell you what our policy is. Our philosophy is limited government ownership in strategic areas. And there are strategic areas. Finance is a strategic area, food is, energy is in strategic areas. But what you know to do better, we don't think the government needs to be involved in. You're the entrepreneur. You know the markets. You can do it better. And therefore you should be doing. Harsha showed the statistics like going from 105 state-owned enterprises to 250 state-owned enterprises. And you saw the losses have gone to more than ₹1 trillion. And we believe in public-private partnerships. And in that regime, we put a committee together, and I remember working with that committee, and we looked at if the state wants to have investments in profitable areas. We looked at the Khazana model, we looked at the Temasek model, Malaysia, Singapore. Suresh Shah chaired that, and I'm glad I read recently that he is chairing a similar committee in the present government. It's a good initiative, a good thing, basically creating a similar model in this country so that investments are run by professionals. What happens now is we take institutions, we put it under the different ministries, and the ministers are sitting there through their secretaries as chief executives giving instructions to commercial enterprises. We want to move away from that. We want to put the people who know what to do in charge of it. And that's why that structure is important. And that's why we are creating that structure so that business people can lead those structures. Then there's one more thing I would like to say here. Bankruptcies can't always be avoided. And therefore we need a Chapter 11. We need a law for bankruptcy and reorganizing bankruptcy. We started on that. We had a committee. Some preliminary work was done. The AG's department played a key role in it. And we will basically resuscitate it. And I think we need to bring that law as well. Then I have just 2 final points. And I want to say these 2 final points. We need to take this country to the next level. It's not going to be easy. I think we have a 2 to 3 year struggle on our hands. Stabilization first, as Harsha says, and then we go into growth. Both of these things have to be done. If I use the word diaspora here, I purposely didn't put the word diaspora, because that word diaspora has been redefined with Sri Lanka's conflict. That's why I purposely put the word here, overseas Sri Lankans. I've been to London, I've been to Boston, I've been to a few places and already started dialogue with the people living in those places. The Sri Lankans living overseas are not a liability. The Sri Lankan living overseas is one of the biggest assets this country has. When I was a young banker and working in Bombay, India came up with the non-resident Indian schemes because they saw the opportunity and the potential. They Sri Lankans, and I'm generalizing here, right? Education levels, skill levels, experience. They have the savings and the dollars. They have the technology transfers. So many huge advantages. We want to welcome them here. We want to welcome them here. Sometimes the stories are awful. I know of a doctor. She's been working here for nearly 30 years, 20-something years. She's a specialist. I won't mention her name because most of you will know. You go to a private hospital if you want to consult her. Every single year, for 25 years, married to a Sri Lankan doctor, she has to go to renew her visa. What kind of crap is this? I think we have to have a much more open mentality. Sri Lankans living overseas must be welcomed here. If they desire to have dual citizenship, they need to be welcomed to have dual citizenship. The second generation of Sri Lankans born there. First generation Sri Lankans, they have their natural ties. They have the old boys unions, the old girls unions. They went to law college, to medical college, professional college. They have the ties and the emotional connection. They will come here because of the emotional connection. The next generation is born there. They're Canadian or they're American or they're Australian or New Zealand or European or something like that. That generation, born there, schooled there, educated there. They have gone further than the first generation. Because even in the international companies that they are in, they have gone further up. Trade and investment. They are a huge potential for this country. We must make them feel welcome. We must open the door for them. Dual citizenship, some of them may be married to foreigners, permanent residencies in this country. Why, if we really want to transform this country, one of the biggest assets we have, why are we actually closing the door on some of the biggest assets that we have? That's a point I want to make here, lots of details. And I'm going to close with this final point before Sajith Premadasa comes to tell you what the SJB is and what we stand for. And I want to close with this one. I put this on education for all. And you're wondering why you're talking about education when you are basically talking on the economy. It's very, very connected. We have two competitive advantages. One advantage this country has is its physical location. Physical location, natural God-given advantage. Gateway, east-west shipping routes. We are the door, basically, to the Indian subcontinent. Airports, ports, all this is there. Logistics, you name it, everything is there. That's one advantage we have. The second huge advantage we have is our human resources. This country has only 22 million people. Only 22 million people. Just the size of 2 cities in India and in China. That's what the SJB's policy is, that every child, every student in this country must have a higher education. We are not going to let happen what happened to my generation. In my generation, very few went to university. Very few got a professional education. Very few got a vocational education. In my generation, our mothers and our sisters went to the Middle East and worked in houses and in homes for $200, $300 and then remitted that $200. But if they had an education, if they had a training, even as a social worker, an elder care worker, a nurse, what would have happened? Not $300, they would be working at $3,000. $3,000. Low income, lifetime low income. High income, lifetime high income. Small population. This is our biggest asset. This asset is important. I believe in families. I believe in societies. We don't want our young people going looking for shelter and green pastures in other countries. We want them in this country. This is not only about economics. It's about ethics, it's about values, it's about families, it's about societies. Not waiting for a phone call from a brother to a sister saying, mother expired, which flight can you take to come back? That's what Sri Lanka has become. That's what we need to reverse. And one of the ways we are going to reverse is by giving an education for all. While Mangala and I were in the Ministry of Finances for a short period of 2.5 years, we wanted to change it in some small way. Just in 2021, 286,000 young people sat the A-levels. 171,000 qualified to go to a Sri Lankan university. 171,000. And the Sri Lankan university is absorbing only 41,000. Nobody talks about the balance 130,000. Those of us who are fortunate, either we had the money or we had the connections. We got a private education or we got a foreign education. But what have we done for 40 years? When J.R. Jayawardena brought that medical school, it was shut down. When Neville Fernando brought Saitam, just 5 years ago, it was shut down. What has this country fallen into? Our SJB education policy is clear. Education policy is opportunity for all. The supplier doesn't have to be the government. We believe in free education. We believe in CWW Kannangara's policy. We are spending less than 2% of GDP on education. We believe that it has to go to 3% and to 4%, and government must increase it. We certainly believe in that. But we don't believe that government can be the only supplier of education. As you know, the top universities in the world are non-government, non-profit distributing. Why can't Sri Lanka have non-government, non-profit distributing? Why can't Sri Lanka have private educational institutions? Why do our children have to be sent to countries they hadn't even heard about previously to get a medical degree or some other degree? Our policy is the government can be a supplier, non-government, non-profit distributing, and the private sector can be a supplier. This is our policy. We want to open the doors so that lots of these people will come. The state has a responsibility, and the state's responsibility is as regulator of standards while we open the door, because education and the economy are tied. That's one important factor. But also, we want to preserve our society and we want to preserve our families. Thank you.